following on the rainfall might have been a certain level and might have changed now. Cool. We're still carrying on with elephants. Chris Barichevy from Tyler is going to talk on is it time to cull, and Pete's also going to talk. Chris is going to talk for a bit, and then Pete's going to carry on.
Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Is it time to cull? Now, the context of this talk is that this talk was brought forward at the International Wildlife Management Congress, and we've had quite a bit of development on that. And so we'll basically be going through a similar argument, but dealing with the feedback that we got. And I mean, there's probably more elephant management people in this room than there were there, so we're really willing to take any feedback. I'm not going to be talking for particularly long. It's not my story to tell. We're at the point now when it's gone from sort of theorizing to application, and I'll be handing over to Pete Runod over here, who, despite the fact he'll try to put you off with his grumpy demeanor, he will actually... Okay, so for those of you who don't know, Itsala Game Reserve, it's 30,000 hectares sitting on the Pongola River. The interesting thing with Pongola Game Reserve is we don't have the northern boundary fence, which is in contravention of the national norms and standards anyway. Our elephant aren't contained. Now, before we go into culling, etc., I want to tell you that this is our vision. Okay, we want more land, we want land expansion. It's good for rhinos, it's good for everything. This is what we're after. Okay, but there are some issues along the way. Okay, land usage surrounding Itsala Game Reserve. Remember that this is taken in 2008. We've got a growing human population. We've got a growing elephant population in there. And we've got to remember that protected areas are seen, often as a conflict of interest with the surrounding communities. We all know what's happening at Ndumo, etc. I mean, this can become a very big problem very, very quickly. So this is the northern river. As you see, there's no fence. And what I want to show you is elephant collar location from 11 elephant collars from 2005 to 2012. As you can see, the elephants don't know that we don't have a fence and they're supposed to stay in here. And so this is a bit of an issue for community relations. Now, proximity to settlement, we're not talking about close. We're talking about 100 elephants are sitting in 6.5 k's outside your reserve over the northern boundary. Cow 9 was measured. And these are cows that I've plotted. I haven't plotted the bulls. Okay, so this is whole big herds of elephants moving out into these areas. And this is not an ideal situation for management. Okay, so what can we do? Pete comes and he gives me all this stuff and he says, right, tell me. Now, I'm a scientist. I can analyze data. What I can tell you is that none of the data that we collect can I use to make a management decision. I can use fancy statistics, I can tell you how far these animals are going, I can tell you where they're going, but nothing works. So what I've had to rely on is some decision theory. Okay, so first, some systems theory 101. My background is in systems ecology. In a complex systems, there's never going to be a cause-effect relationship. It's spurious by its very nature. So, the question of how many elephants can we have in Itsala, or when will they kill someone, I cannot answer with the data, okay? So now what we're going to do is, the decision-making we're going to do is on the back of narratives, scenarios, and risk-benefit analysis, and that's what Pete's going to be showing you today. So please never ask me how many elephants we should have in Itsala Game Reserve, okay? And, like, it belongs in the 70s. There's nothing wrong with it. It is useful. Now, I don't want to push too many buttons, but there is a use for carrying capacity when there's density dependence, and rhinos are a good example. But in terms of elephants, there's no data to show that in a small protected area there's any kind of density dependence, and so we should just throw that out the window and use a relative model that'll work. Okay, so let's use the old original thought experiment from Burton Russell. This is in terms of mitigating risk. Should we cull elephants to mitigate risk? The thing is, look at a variable in a turkey's life. Off it goes. It's a turkey. What happens then? That's Thanksgiving. Nothing in a turkey's life tells it about what's going to happen on Thanksgiving, and it's just a fundamentally unpredictable thing. So we don't know what's going to happen, and if we reduce the population of elephants, we may still have an effect outside. So what I'm saying is that none of our collected data can allow us. It's just covariates, and we can't use it. So what are we going to use to make this decision? Firstly, let's go back to the ecology. Why are the elephants leaving Itsala? We've had these ideas of, is it resource limitation? And Adrian Schrader has shown that no, it's not. Well, with the studies that have been done, we can do more and more research. We can carry on going, but at some point we have to make a decision. We're about to have the norms and standards signed off. We have to implement something. What are we going to implement? And what I'm going to tell you now is that we don't have an ecological reason to reduce elephant populations in a protected area in South Africa, as far as I can work out. So, what are we going to do? Okay, so let's look at the context of how we have to manage these elephants. We've got a management plan, which sits in the time of IMP, and we have objectives. And the number one objective is to show that risks to humans, infrastructure, and livelihood are minimized. We can show that we can't necessarily work out what that is going to do now in terms of the data, but does management allow a growing elephant population to exit the reserve in proximity of a growing human population unimpeded? Now, if the answer is yes, for whatever reason, logistics, cost, etc., we're doing so at risk, and this is where we'll possibly get some lawyers involved, but how much risk should we be taking? And this is stakeholder value dependent, and that's the idea. So you find out from your stakeholders, and that becomes your stick in the sand, and you can manage relative to that. It's objective-based management, and we need to do it. Okay, so decision frameworks. How do we generally make a decision? This is Bob Scholes' work. In the phase of uncertainty, you set some kind of threshold, you put an uncertainty risk aversion, you build a model, you put lines, confidence intervals, and you make a line. Right, then you build in some form of inertia. Right, so we build in inertia bar, then we build in some time for being taken to court, and that's where you act. And so this is what Pete and I are trying to do now. We're getting into a point where we need to get this thing going. We need to say, okay, what do we need to do? If we're going to act, we have to act now. We can't wait for the trade train to hit us before we actually do something. And the issue that we're having is to use this model. We accept zero interactions with humans, but it's already happening. I personally don't think it's going to fundamentally change anything to reduce elephant numbers. So I'm going to hand over to Pete now, and what Pete's going to do is he's going to go through how do we take this idea of using a subjective-based management and actually put it into practice on the ground. And Pete's got 20 years of experience behind his belt, so he can do this a lot better than I can. So here you go, Mr. Munoz.
Chris. Okay, Chris has given the background there. Let's ask ourselves the question. What now? Okay, it's my ominous task to try and deal with this issue because, as Chris rightly points out, the problem already exists. We have elephants walking out with the associated risk. And based on what we presented in July, we had a fair bit of feedback, and we're going to focus on some of those, or I'm going to focus on some of those feedback issues in the context of the what now. So that's our projected number. Taryn, who's sitting here, worked out in 2007 that our elephants, where's the light on this? Okay. Okay, that our population was growing at about that. So you can see that the population is obviously increasing. It's probably increasing at closer to 8.1% now rather than 7.8%. So with that, we also need to understand that although Natal is 30,000 hectares, Nolf and Royen in 2009 worked out that our elephants are probably only using about 17,000 hectares of the reserve because that's the preferred habitat. So what we're dealing with is an increased elephant population within a condensed area of Natal. Alright, now with increased elephant population comes increased elephants outside the reserve. I think that's a logical conclusion. So the risk is only going to get worse. Alright, our present interventions. We have for years gone out across the Pongola, fired blanks at elephants, thrown thunder flashes at them, tried to scare them with air horns, etc., etc. And generally speaking, it has had an effect. They have returned. And in the worst case scenario, we've brought in helicopters, hovered over them, shot at them with shotguns, etc., and chased them back into the park. But the trigger for that action with helicopters really is driven by the proximity of those animals, as Chris pointed out, to settlement, to crops, etc., or people phoning and saying, come and fetch your elephants. So the excursions continue despite the fact that we've been doing this for the last 10, 15 years. All right. In addition, we also removed bulls between 2002 and 2009 to try and stop them leaving the reserve, trying to use culling problem bulls that were walking out to deter animals from leaving. Now that culminated in 2009. We shot 4 elephants in one day. All right, one was left in the Pongola River right in the northeast. And the next day, despite the fact that the elephants had been chased in, they just turned around and walked past their dead buddy and tootled outside again. So really it became apparent to us that that was having no effect. And because we have a population that was introduced as orphan calves, and because we were concentrating on bulls, we were essentially perpetuating our own delinquency problems. And we weren't allowing bulls to age and come through the system like elephants should do. So we stopped that. Okay, so now in the context of the risk, what options do we have? Now this is where the feedback from people kicks in. We have to manage the risk. It's our mandate. So the first option is now contain the elephant. So except we have to fence that northern boundary somewhere. But the question is where? Right, Chris pointed out our vision. He mentioned the risk-benefit analysis, and this is from Carl and Sam Ferreira's work, and Sam Parks. Using our IMP, our stated objectives, we look at benefits, cost, certainty and risks linked to certain scenarios, and that then gives you a specific evaluation of the risks that you carry and the associated benefits that come with those scenarios. Right, now if we look at the three scenarios, hold on a sec. What is it all about? Sorry, talking about objectives. This is what he told us all about. Not elephants. It's rhino. It's our stated biodiversity objective, our number one objective. Elephants exist, it's not a conservation objective of Natal, it's not stated. But they are obviously a management priority. So, the options we have in terms of the scenarios: status quo, fence out the river, or fence in the river and expand the land in the reserve. Right, fencing out the river. That's what we're looking at. That red line at the top is what we would be doing. The effect of that is this: excluding productive habitat, resilient habitat from elephant and rhino, massive financial implications, 16 million rand, big time constraints, and a major management nightmare with animals that have never ever been stopped from walking out. They've always managed to get out. The questionable effect with community relations I'll touch on just now, but there will be. And we will then have a situation where, because the elephant are leaving the park and utilizing resources outside the reserve, it has the benefit that it's less impact in the park. So if we were to fence off the river, we're going to compound impact. I also need some water here. Okay. Right. These are the risks if we fence out the river. If we put that fence up to the tune of 20 million rand, we're going to close the door on expansion. Because once that fence is up, you go and talk to communities outside there. That fence is up. Why would they possibly agree to take the fence down again? For you to put it up somewhere else, which then includes the area that they currently can utilize. So that's not likely. So let's learn from our previous management actions. Fencing out rivers within a protected area. Ndumu, case in point, the Sutu River. In the end, we took that fence down. Okay, it was linked to black rhino, but we put a fence up. We had it there for 10 years, and in the end, we realized it wasn't the right decision. We ended up taking it down. So we haven't had a good track record. Okay, but if we put up a fence, all right, what fence? 1 to 2 strand electric fence. That's what people are suggesting. Is it practical? Is it feasible? It's practical, yes. But can we keep elephant in with that fence? Okay? I don't think so. Yes, we may keep adult elephants back, but young elephants will walk out. Do we want to separate young animals from adult animals, one on one side of the fence and the others on the other? No. So if we're going to do it, we're going to have to put up an electric fence or another fence that's good enough to keep everything in. Maintaining a 56-kilometer fence in Natala's topography, Chris showed you a photo of the northern boundary, will be wonderful. Okay, so this is what we want. We want this. Okay, because it makes so much sense. But it's expensive. We've been trying for the better part of the last 15 years to consolidate that. There are community objections and conditions linked to expansion, but there are also huge opportunities for external funding and partnerships. Okay, now that same scenario that I referred to with Ferreira's method shows clearly that range expansion is the way to go. Even the status quo is better than fencing out the river. Okay, now where do we draw this line? Okay, if we fence in the river, this is this thin column here, and we start next year, we finished in 2 years' time, we're talking about an elephant population that will be just over 200 and fenced in. If we give ourselves 5 years to try and consolidate the land outside. In 2018-19, we'd be sitting with a population closer to 300. Okay. So our proposal is that we go for broke. We want the range expansion. Global conservation wants to see it, makes a lot of sense, but how much time do we give ourselves? How much longer do we wait while the elephant population grows and so does the human population? Do we accept that we carry the risk for a defined period of time, i.e. 5 years, at which point if range expansion is not agreed upon, that we then fence out the river? If that happens, we're going to have to accelerate population control because it will be a greater number in a smaller area. And even if range expansion happens in 5 years, we'll have almost 300 elephant in 50,000 hectares. Or if it doesn't, we're condensing them back into the 17,000 hectares I mentioned. Okay, so that considered, in addition, we thought, we were asked to consider, don't we contracept now? Should we not be slowing down our population growth now? Okay? This may mitigate the size of the potential problem down the line. If we give ourselves 5 years to reach agreement, and even if we contracept from next year, what is the impact potentially going to be? If we contracept now, by the time we get to 5 years, we'll have that little difference. Lag time, 3 years on contraception, it works out to about 20 elephants. So we'd have to remove 20 elephants less in 5 years' time compared to if we do it now. Right, so given the uncertainty, okay, the costs, the risks and everything else, would you guys as an audience and stakeholders agree that translocating a large number of elephant is the right way to go? Because it minimizes the size of the potential problem in 5 years' time. Translocating. I think everyone would say yes. All right? Right, is translocation feasible then? Jeff Cook, first comma 120 times. No, it's not feasible in Utala. Terrain, topography, distance, road networks, forget it. So, do we remove elephant now to save elephant later type thing? This is what we're looking at. If we remove now, and we remove 114 elephant, that would be the effect on the population. If we don't, and we have to do it in 5 years' time, we have to remove 180. So you can see the quandary that we're in. But given what I've just said, and that's just the idea of, let's say, a group of about 60 elephant going back into the park, but that gives you an idea of our herd structure and what we need to look at removing. Is it time to cull? So.
Well done. We've got about 2 minutes for questions. Has anyone got any questions? Simon?